Welcome. The Yemeni army launches a ballistic missile attack against Saudi targets in Yemen's central province of Ma'rib, killing 8 Saudi commanders and soldiers. The spokesman for the Yemeni armed forces said the missile targeted an operation room in a military base belonging to Saudi-led forces. General Yahya Sari said the mission was carried out on Saturday afternoon using a Badr ballistic missile. 7 more Saudi military personnel were also injured in the attack. Saudi Arabia and a number of its regional allies launched a devastating war on Yemen in March 2015. The aggression has led to the death of tens of thousands of Yemenis, mostly civilians. Millions more have been displaced. The conflict has caused a dire humanitarian situation, which the UN has called the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Joining us for more on this edition of the News Review is Yves Engler. He's an author and commentator, and we also have Jason Unruhe, a political commentator. Gentlemen, welcome. Yves, if I could start with you. Many would be asking this question at this moment in time, considering the recent operation that Yemeni forces have targeted Saudi military base in Yemen's Ma'rib province. Many would be asking, what's Saudi Arabia doing in Yemen's Ma'rib province?
Well, I think Saudi Arabia is violating international law and basically trying to turn Yemen back to the Stone Ages and force much of the country on assistance for its food and basically dominate a country with the full backing of the U.S. and much of the so-called international community of NATO Western states.
And Jason, a retaliatory attack by Yemeni forces, we're going to hear, as we usually do, a lot of condemnation from Western countries, yet the relentless Saudi bombardment of hospitals and schools, they're killing 40 school children on a school bus with a US-made bomb. There's silence. Well, explain that one to us.
Essentially what we have is an imperialist endeavor in which Yemen is being attacked by Saudi Arabia for the benefit of imperialist plunder. Some of those beneficiaries include the United States, Canada, and the UK. So naturally, the news media organizations of those countries which are in support of the imperialist war, although they often don't explicitly say they are, tend to lie by omission by removing certain information from their reporting. For example, they will show outrage or just reports of Saudi Arabia being hit by Yemen, yet in that same breath, they will completely ignore when Saudi Arabia strikes and kills Yemeni civilians. Well, because it casts them in a bad light, because killing civilians is a bad thing to do. And since Saudi Arabia has stood so firmly as a U.S. ally, one that has carried out many of its interests in the Middle East, they're incentivized not to expose the crimes that they have carried out. And as a result of this, you get a very biased media, one that is not so much biased, but wholly dishonest by removing certain facts that would tell the truth about the situation on the ground and the ongoing Saudi genocide against the Yemenis.
Right. Yves, Jason raises a point there. This war has been going on for 6 years. The Yemenis, we don't hear reports of Yemeni forces killing Saudi nationals. We do hear vice versa, Saudi forces killing Yemeni civilians, whereas Yemeni forces tend to target Saudi military positions. But I guess 6 years, when is it going to end? And can it end if Western weapons supplies, the chain supply continues to roll to Saudi Arabia?
I think it's going to end when the U.S. primarily, but the other countries that are providing the weaponry, my country included, Canada, when they say enough's enough. And if you look at the condemnations of the Canadian government, you'll find that it's only when the absolute worst violence by Saudi Arabia, when they kill 150 people at a wedding, that you finally get a very sort of soft criticism by the Canadian government. Obviously, if anything happens in Saudi Arabia, the Canadian government's immediately there to criticize Yemen, the Houthis, or Iran, or others. But it's only when it's the absolute worst of the violence by Saudi Arabia, the vast majority of it goes in silence. And the Canadian government, I mean, in the midst of all this Saudi destruction in Yemen, in the midst of growing awareness globally, in last year, in 2019, they doubled their arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Almost $3 billion worth of Canadian weapons were delivered to Saudi Arabia. There's many videos of Canadian light armored vehicles that have been used by the Saudis in Yemen, rifles, other weaponry that just continue to be used in Yemen. And so I think that really this is going to end when the Saudi monarchy is finally told by Washington, Ottawa, and others, no more, and we're going to stop providing the fuel, the weaponry, for this terrible destruction of human life.
Right. And Jason, we can't really talk about Yemen without noting the humanitarian disaster that's there. The UN describes it as the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. What's the reasons for that, in your opinion? Many have blamed a Saudi all-out blockade.
Yes, there are several key factors to what led to the ongoing humanitarian crisis in the country. The main thing is the acts by Saudi Arabia of blockading the country, of destroying very vital infrastructure such as hospitals, etc. There have been markets that have been targeted where people go to buy food and everyday items. There's blocking them from having shipments of medicine going into the country. This is solely on the head of the Saudi Arabians and those in the Western media who have, the Western governments who have wholly supported their endeavor. Obviously, it is very clear that the Saudi government is trying to starve out the Yemeni people, deprive them of medicine, deprive them of even the most basic necessities in order to brutalize the population into submission. This is not an uncommon tactic used by imperialist powers. This is actually very quite common. And Saudi Arabia has basically had a free hand in order to do so because the main imperialist powers of the world have been backing them up on it. So when you have a situation like that, and then many of the so-called international organizations which are supposed to regulate these kinds of antagonisms within the global order are unable to get in and do the job, one wonders whether or not these organizations should exist if they can't do the job it is that they were supposed to do.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for that. We've run out of time, I am afraid. Let me thank our guests for their contribution. Eve Engler, author and commentator. Jason Unruhe, a political commentator. And dear viewers, thank you for staying tuned to this edition of the News Review.